The city of Solara shone under two suns. The tall towers looked like silver candles touched by bright fire. Every street had banners moving slowly in the warm wind. Music floated through the air. It was the day when the people of Solara would see their queen and her only daughter, Princess Leora. Queen Helena stood on the high balcony, dressed in white and silver. Her hair was dark, and her eyes calm. She had ruled with kindness and strength for many years. Next to her, Princess Leora smiled and waved. She looked younger than her duty allowed, her eyes full of wonder. The people cheered when they saw her. Many believed she would one day be a great ruler, even better than her mother. Leora loved everything about Solara. She liked walking among the common people, listening to their stories. She spoke with farmers, engineers, and star pilots. She wanted to understand every part of the kingdom, yet her heart always looked toward the stars. She dreamed of leaving the city, not to escape, but to see what lay beyond. Her teachers told her stories of the other worlds where humans had built small colonies. She longed to fly there. When the queen spoke to her daughter that morning, she said, "You have your father's courage. But promise me that when you travel, you will always come back." Leora smiled, touched her mother's hand, and said, "I promise, mother. I will always find my way home." That promise was the last peaceful moment they would share for a long time. Weeks later, a small group of explorers prepared to leave Solara for a world called Orion. It was a new colony, rich in energy crystals needed for Solara's growing engines. Leora asked to join them. "If I am to lead one day," she said, "I must see how people build and survive beyond our city." At first, the queen said no. The risk was too great. But the princess begged her with such hope that at last Queen Helena gave in. She placed a small pendant around Leora's neck. "It has our family crest," she said softly. "If you ever feel lost, hold it close, and I will be near." The journey began with laughter and bright eyes. The ship, strong and safe, cut through the stars like a bird made of light. The crew loved their young princess, who never behaved as if she were above them. She worked beside them, cleaned engines, listened to their songs. For a while, it felt like a true adventure. Everything changed when they reached Orion. The planet was rough and wild. Its winds were sharp, its ground soft under heavy clouds. The first days went well. Explorers built small shelters near the crystal fields. Leora helped carry tools, though her guards begged her to stay inside. On the seventh day, things went wrong. The sky turned green and crimson as the ground began to quake. Sirens screamed. The machines shook. A deep sound rose from under the soil like thunder trapped in stone. Someone shouted that a fault line was tearing open beneath the camp. In seconds, half the buildings collapsed. Leora tried to reach her transporter, but the path was broken. Her guard captain grabbed her arm and pulled her toward a small shuttle. The light outside was too bright. Gusts of dust hid the sun. People ran in every direction, shouting for help. Strong blast threw them to the ground. The guard got up and wrapped his arms around her, pushing her inside the shuttle. "Stay here, princess. I will bring the others," said. He ran out before she could stop him. That was the last time she saw him alive. The shuttle's doors closed by automatic command. It lifted into the storm, while chunks of fiery rock fell like rain. Leora cried out, wanting to stop the ship, to open the doors, but it was impossible. The system flew in sudden panic, trying to find a safe orbit. She looked down and saw the camp vanish in smoke and light. Then the world went dark. Back on Solara, days passed, then weeks, with no signal. Search ships left one after another. None found a trace. Queen Helena spent long nights in the command hall, listening to static through the transmitters. Each morning, she told herself that the next message would carry her daughter's voice. Each evening, her hope dimmed a little more. At dawn of the 20th day, the queen stood alone on the balcony, where she and Leora had once waved to their people. The city below had grown silent. Banners no longer moved in joy, but hung heavy with dust. The queen looked to the stars and said quietly, "If you can hear me, my child, come home. I will wait as long as it takes." And far away, buried in cold silence among the broken stars, a small pod drifted through unknown darkness, carrying a princess who would one day light the sky again. Ethan sat alone in his small ship called Dawnlight. The ship was old and scratched, like it had lived 100 lives. Ethan often joked to himself that the ship looked tired, just like him. He carried food and medicine from one colony to another. People trusted him because he always finished his trips, even when storms came or engines broke down. He was not a man who spoke much. The quiet felt like his only friend now. Many years ago, Ethan had a brother who worked as a rescue pilot. His brother had gone on a dangerous mission and never returned. Since that day, Ethan had been afraid of losing anyone else, so he decided to travel alone. The stars outside looked calm, but space was never safe. There were broken ships floating forever, pirates waiting to attack, and storms that could tear through metal. Ethan knew all these dangers, but faced them anyway. It was his way of feeling useful. Some people dreamed of glory. Ethan only dreamed of helping someone survive another day. One night, while traveling near a cold moon far from any trade path, Ethan heard a weak sound through the radio. It was not a voice, more like a low cry hidden under noise. He leaned closer, adjusting the controls. The signal blinked again, faint but real. He spoke quietly, as if not to scare it away. "This is transport ship Dawnlight. Identify yourself." There was no answer, only static mixed with small fragments of a code. Ethan frowned and checked the radar. A small signal was flashing near the shadow side of the moon. Logic told him to ignore it. It could be old wreckage. It could even be a trap. But something inside him said no. What if someone was alive down there? He slowed the ship and entered the moon's thin atmosphere. The ground looked empty except for a long canyon shaped like a giant scar. As Ethan flew closer, he saw a broken pod half buried in ice. It was still giving off a weak heat signal. Ethan landed his ship a few steps away and put on his warm coat. The air outside was thin and sharp. He climbed down, his boots sinking into white dust. The pod door was twisted, frozen shut. He hit it with a metal bar until it cracked. Inside, he found a young woman lying still, her face pale but peaceful. Her chest moved slowly. She was alive. "Hold on," Ethan whispered. He lifted her carefully and carried her back to his ship. She was lighter than he expected. He placed her in the small rest cabin and wrapped her in heat cloth. For hours, he tried to warm her body while clearing the frost from her hair. He gave her thin drops of water on her lips. Finally, she opened her eyes. They were bright but full of confusion. She looked around, frightened. "Where am I?" she asked. Her voice was weak, like a wind across glass. "You're safe," Ethan told her. "I found you inside a crash pod on a moon. You're on my ship now." She blinked and tried to sit up but fell back. "My name is Leora," she said slowly. "I'm from Solara." Ethan paused. Solara was the great capital world, a place of royalty and shining cities. He looked at her again and saw the small chain around her neck, carrying the royal crest. He remembered the news from years ago, the lost princess of Solara. Everyone had believed she was dead. He stepped back, unsure what to say. "Then you're the princess?" Leora nodded, tears rising behind her eyes. "I was with a team. The ground broke apart. I thought I was going to die." Her words fell soft and short. Ethan kept his voice steady. "You're not dead. You're alive, and that's what matters." For a long moment, silence filled the small cabin. The hum of the engine sounded almost like a heartbeat. Then Ethan said, "You should rest. When you wake, we'll plan how to get home." The next day, Leora could stand. She walked through the narrow ship, touching the old walls with wonder. "You live out here alone?" she asked. Ethan smiled faintly. "Someone has to deliver food and medicine. It's not exciting, but people need it." She watched him check the monitors. "You helped me for no reason. You could have left, maybe," he said. "But I couldn't. It doesn't feel right to leave someone behind." Something in his calm voice eased the fear inside her. She smiled for the first time since waking. Hours later, the radio came alive again, but this time it was not a rescue signal. It was a warning. A pirate group had been seen near the same route they would need to travel to reach Solara. Ethan looked at the map, then at Leora. "We'll need to be careful," he said quietly. Leora stood beside him, her eyes wide and steady. "I trust you," she said simply. In that moment, Ethan felt the old emptiness inside him shift into something new. He didn't know if he could fight pirates or overcome storms again, but he knew one thing: he would not let anything happen to her. Outside, the stars seemed brighter, as if they were lighting the way for two lives that fate had thrown together in the cold. Ethan worked through the night, fixing the damaged parts of his ship. The engines had burned too much fuel lifting from the moon, and half the power grid was weak. He moved with quiet focus while Leora watched from the side, her blanket wrapped around her shoulders. The small cabin smelled of metal and warm air. Outside the window, the stars were still and endless. Leora could hardly believe that days ago she was frozen inside a broken pod, lost in the dark. Now she was flying again, alive next to a man she had never known. She watched how carefully Ethan touched the tools, how steady his hands were. He looked tired but calm, like someone who had spent too much time alone and learned to live with silence. "Ethan," she said softly, "how long have you been doing this?" He looked up. "Trading and repair work." "About 8 years, always alone." He gave a short nod. "That's how I like it, fewer people to worry about." She smiled, knowing he said it, but did not believe it. "Now you have me," she replied. He glanced at her with a faint grin. "Yes, it seems I do." For a while they sat together in quiet. The hum of the engines made the silence peaceful, almost comforting. Leora touched the small crest around her neck. "Do you think we can reach Solara?" "We will," Ethan said simply. "But we have to cross a rough zone before the main route. Pirate traffic is heavy there, and my ship is not built for fighting." Leora frowned. "You said you carry food and medicine? Why would anyone attack that?" "Because hungry people take what they can. Because greed hides everywhere," he answered. "They see a ship, they shoot first, take later. That's the way it is out here." She lowered her eyes. "In the palace, people never told me much about danger. They said humans were safe under the crown. I wanted to believe them." Ethan tightened a bolt and said quietly, "Safety is something people build every day. Doesn't stay unless someone keeps it alive." His words stayed in her mind. She followed him through the narrow hallway as he checked wires. Every corner of the ship told a story about hard work and patience. Later, he showed her how to use the navigation screen. "If something happens to me," he said, "tap here to turn the ship around. It will use its memory to return to the last safe point." She looked straight at him. "Nothing will happen to you." He smiled a little. "You sound sure." "I am," she said firmly. Days passed. Leora learned to help with small tasks. She cooked simple meals from the storage packs, cleaned the cabin, learned to read fuel lines. Ethan was surprised by how quick she learned and how bright her laugh sounded in the small space. One evening, they shared a meal by the front window. "The stars drifted slowly ahead," Leora said. "When I get home, my mother will not believe this. She thinks I am gone forever." Ethan stirred his cup of tea. "She will be proud to see you again. Every parent waits for that day." Leora looked at him, wondering what sorrow lived behind his quiet voice. "You've lost someone," she said softly, nodded once. "My brother. He went out to save others. Never came back." "I'm sorry," she whispered. "It's all right," he said. "I still hear him sometimes. He would tell me to keep flying when they finished eating." The ship alarm beeped. A red light blinked across the console. Ethan moved fast. "Pirates," he said. "Found us." On the radar, 3 red dots appeared, closing in fast. Ethan started the engines at full power. The dawnlight groaned but obeyed. Leora gripped the seat as the ship jumped ahead. "They're chasing us!" she shouted. "I see them," Ethan answered. He began turning through sharp angles, cutting across an asteroid field. The small ship shook, while pieces of rock flashed past the windows. The pirate ships were bigger, faster, and stronger. Ethan's calm voice guided the moment. "We can't outrun them, but we can hide." He pressed a switch, and the ship dived low into a glowing cloud of dust. Lightning crossed the sky around them. "The storm will blind their scanners." The lights flickered again and again. Leora covered her ears as thunder rolled through space. Ethan's knuckles turned white around the controls. For minutes that felt like hours, nothing existed except noise and flashes of light. At last the radar lights vanished. The pirate ships were gone. Ethan shut off half the systems to cool the engines. Both of them sat still, breathing fast. Leora reached out and placed her hand on his arm. "You saved us." He turned his head slowly, looking at her tired eyes and trembling hands. "No," he said with a small smile. "We saved each other." Later that night, when the ship floated quietly once more, Leora lay in her small cot. Sleep came slowly, but her heart felt lighter. She knew the journey was far from over, yet she felt safer than she had in years. The control room. Ethan watched the stars ahead and whispered to himself, "One more flight, just one more." He never liked to hope too much, but now, for the first time in a long while, hope did not feel so distant. The journey toward Solara took many more days. The small ship moved slower now after the fight and the storm. Ethan repaired what he could, but some parts were too damaged. The cabin lights dimmed often, and sometimes the radio cut in and out. Still, both of them stayed calm. They had passed through so much darkness already that even small troubles felt easy to face. Each morning, Leora sat by the front window and watched the stars. They reminded her of the gardens back home where light flowers opened at night. She often spoke quietly about her mother, Queen Helena. Ethan listened without saying much, but he liked hearing her stories. They made the silence warmer. Leora told him about the long halls of the palace, the smell of fresh bread from the kitchen, the laughter of the people during festivals. Ethan tried to imagine it, but could not. He had never seen such beauty. All his life had been ships, tools, and empty planets. "You will see it soon," Leora said one evening as they shared a small meal. "You brought me this far. My mother will thank you herself." Ethan smiled slowly. "I just did what anyone would have done." "No," she said gently. "Not everyone would risk their life for someone they did not know." He looked at her across the small table. "You would have done the same," he said. "I can tell." The next day they entered a zone full of bright clouds. It was the border of Solara's system. The light from the twin suns painted the ship gold. For a moment, everything felt safe again. Then the radio came alive with a sudden signal. "Unregistered craft, identify yourself," a voice ordered. Ethan quickly answered, "Transport ship Dawnlight, carrying a survivor from the Orion mission, requesting safe entry." There was silence. Then another voice, softer but shocked. "Repeat that message." Ethan repeated it. Leora leaned forward, her hand shaking. The voice returned, filled with emotion. "If that is true, you are carrying Princess Leora of Solara. Remain in orbit. Royal guards are on their way." Leora's eyes filled with tears. "They heard us," she whispered. "They know it's me." She looked at Ethan. "We did it." He felt relief spread through his chest. For the first time in years, he saw hope not as a dream, but as a light ahead. Less than an hour later, bright ships surrounded them. They were large and clean, shining like mirrors. Message flashed, "Prepare for escort." Ethan followed their lead. The old engines hummed softly as the Dawnlight joined the line. When the planet grew larger in the window, Leora pressed her hand to the glass. Cities glowed like rivers of fire below, and the ocean shined silver under the twin suns. Her heart beat fast.
"At home,"
she said again and again. As they entered the atmosphere, the air outside turned bright white. When the view cleared, Ethan saw tall towers, green fields, and wide roads full of people. The escort ships guided them toward the royal landing yard. Soldiers and officials waited there. Music floated faintly through the air. When the ship touched the ground, Leora looked at Ethan. For a moment, she did not move. "Will you come with me?" she asked. He nodded. "You shouldn't face the crowd alone." The door opened, and warm air rushed inside. Leora stepped out slowly, her eyes filling. Then, from the grand gates of the courtyard came a woman dressed in silver and white. It was the Queen. For a moment, no one breathed. Then Leora ran forward, crying out, "Mom, I'm home." "He rescued me." The crowd gasped. The Queen stumbled down the steps and met her daughter halfway. Their arms wrapped around each other as both began to cry. It was not the quiet royal kind of tears, but deep, shaking sobs of joy and pain mixed together. People watching began to cheer, some crying as well. The lost daughter had returned. When the Queen lifted her head, she saw Ethan standing nearby, unsure what to do. His clothes were torn, his face pale from sleepless nights, but his eyes were kind. The Queen walked toward him. Everyone watched. She took his hands and said softly, "No crown is enough to show our thanks. You brought my world back to me." Ethan bowed his head. "Your Majesty, I only did what was right." She smiled. "And that is what makes it great." Guards and doctors came to take Leora for rest, but before leaving, she turned back to him. "Don't disappear," she said. "I want you there when I wake up." He nodded with a small smile. "I will stay." As the sun set that evening, the city of Solara glowed brighter than ever before. Fireworks colored the sky, and bells rang across the towers. Queen Helena stood at her balcony holding her daughter's hand. People cheered below until their voices echoed through every street. For them, it was a day of miracles. And in the quiet landing yard, Ethan stood beside his ship, watching the lights above. He had lived his life in darkness and silence, thinking he had no place left. Now, because he had followed one faint signal on a lonely night, he had found not only a purpose, but a home among strangers who had become something much more. The morning after the long night of celebration, the palace of Solara was quiet. The stars above the city faded in the light of dawn. Inside her room, Princess Leora opened her eyes slowly. For a moment, she thought she was still on Ethan's small ship, hearing the soft hum of the engines. Then she saw the wide windows, the bright curtains, and the kind face of her mother beside her. Queen Helena smiled through her tears. "You are home," she whispered, touching her daughter's hair. Leora sat up, her heart full. "It feels like a dream, Mother. Sometimes I fear I will wake up and still be out there in the cold." "You are safe now," the Queen said, "and the man who saved you is here too. He asked nothing from us, not even a reward." Leora's eyes grew bright. "Ethan is here." "Yes," her mother said. "He wished to check on his ship before meeting us again. He says it needs rest, just like he does." That made Leora laugh softly. It sounds like him. A few hours later, a small group of guards led Ethan through the golden halls of the palace. He felt uneasy walking on floors that shone like mirrors. He was used to metal decks and narrow passages. Now, servants bowed to him, and people watched with smiles. He did not know how to act. The Queen waited at the end of the hall. When he reached her, she stepped down from her throne and greeted him with both hands. "Ethan," she said, "this world owes you everything." He bowed his head politely. "Your Majesty, I only followed a signal. I never expected that signal would change lives." The Queen's eyes softened. "Sometimes fate hides great meaning in small things. I wish to honor you properly. If you will allow it, I would like to name you Guardian of Solara's frontier. It means you will protect our colonies and guide explorers who need help." Ethan looked surprised. He had never wanted titles, but the thought of helping others again touched his heart. "I would be proud to serve," he said. Applause filled the hall. The Queen smiled and then stepped aside so that her daughter could come forward. Leora wore a simple white gown, her face bright with joy. When she saw Ethan, she forgot the formality and ran straight to him. "You kept your promise," she said. "She said you would stay." "I keep my word," he answered, smiling. Their eyes met, and for a moment, it was as if the whole room faded away. They both remembered the cold nights in space, the fear, the laughter, and the light of distant stars that had kept them company when hope felt small. In the days that followed, stories of the rescue spread through every city and colony. Children told each other about the brave pilot who had crossed storms and danger to bring the lost princess home. Artists painted the scene of the ship landing as the Queen ran to embrace her daughter. People said it showed the heart of humankind at its best, brave, kind, and guided by love for one another. Leora began to visit the learning centers of Solara, telling young people that courage did not come from crowns or armies, but from simple choices. "The world grows better," she said, "when we reach out our hands to those who are lost." Ethan spent his time helping engineers rebuild rescue systems along the outer worlds. He taught new pilots how to listen for faint distress calls, and how to keep faith when the sky felt too dark. Sometimes when he returned to Solara between missions, he met with Leora in the palace gardens. They often sat beside the tall fountains, talking about everything they had seen. He told her of new colonies learning to grow food on dry ground. She told him about how her mother now planned to build hospitals for the poor. Each conversation left them smiling, knowing they had both been changed by what they had lived through. One evening, while sunset painted the sky in gold and red, The queen joined them in the garden. She looked at Ethan and said, "There are times when power cannot save us, when only the human heart can. You have reminded all of us of that truth." Ethan bowed slightly. "Your Majesty, the heart is the strongest engine we have. Keeps us flying even when everything else fails." The queen smiled, then turned to her daughter. "I think your father would have liked him very much," she said softly. Leora nodded, her eyes shining. "He already does, Mother. I can feel it." As night came, the city lights started to glow, and the sound of music rose once more from the streets below. People still celebrated the miracle of the lost princess and the brave pilot. For them, it was not only a story of rescue, but a promise that kindness still existed, even in the darkest parts of space. Ethan looked up at the stars and felt peace. For years, he had carried the pain of his brother's loss and the silence that followed. Now he carried something different. The memory of a promise kept, and the friendship of those who understood his heart. Beside him, Leora followed his gaze. "Do you ever miss the stars?" she asked. "Always," he said quietly. "But I don't feel lost in them anymore." She smiled. "Good," she said. Together they watched the night sky spread above Solara, endless and bright, full of new trails waiting to be crossed. The world was whole again, and the future felt wide and kind. And from that time onward, people of Solara would tell their children a simple truth, that one human heart can light the way home. And that every rescue begins when someone decides not to turn away.